All right, so as I mentioned last class, today is the last lecture. Okay, so today we're going to be working on the very final portion of Sketchup in Photoshop. We're going to be working on the architectural perspective, which, as you probably know, is kind of the culmination of everything that we've done so far this semester. You should be able to kind of backtrack and look at Photoshop, look at SketchUp, and all of the different things that we've done between the two pieces of software, and really use little bits of information from all of them. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind. And while I'm doing the example today, you'll see I'll touch base on a handful of those techniques. Okay. Most of them which you should be familiar with, okay? There's not really a new technique that we're going to be learning. It's just really kind of putting them all together and using them together, okay? Really quickly before we start, let's just look at what we have due. There's not a whole lot left, as I just said. The perspective is going to be due next Wednesday, or Wednesday as in 2 days. Assignment 6, which is the cabin, it says it's due on the 17th. Which is on Wednesday. I'm going to extend that till Monday, okay? Just because I don't want you guys to have to cram to finish the perspective and then not have enough time to really kind of dial in maybe some of the other imagery, okay? But also keep in mind that because it's due on Monday, that leaves you a little bit less time to work on the portfolio. So just make sure that you kind of juggle between the two different pieces or the two different assignments. Okay, so we do have a very significant amount of points that will be rewarded over the next week for both the assignment and the portfolio. That is a total of 50 points. So it's a good chunk of your grade. If you're going to kick it into high gear at any time, it's definitely now, as this is it is a very important part of the semester, and this is by far, the best work that will go into your portfolio that we've worked on, okay? I'm sure you have lots of other good work with other classes too, but for this class, this is by far the best thing that we create, and it's also like the most fun thing that you probably do the entire semester too, so it's definitely a good time to kick it into overgear. So let's just a quick little refresher on what is due for assignment 6. 4 elevations, 3 of which can just be simple colored elevations with shadows, okay? So you can add your textures, add your shadows. Other than that, a white background is totally fine. You don't need to go as far as doing the complete rendered elevation for every one of them, unless you really want to. But only 1 fully rendered elevation is required, along with the rendered plan, a rendered section, and 2 rendered perspectives, okay? We'll do 1 in class today. That is what is required for the exercise, and then you are required to do 1 more, okay? But that's about it. You guys should, for the most part, you should have a majority of those materials done, okay? If you've been able to keep up with the exercises over the last 2 weeks, you should have a majority of that work done. If at worst, you should maybe just be touching them up a little bit and refining, and that's about it. And then working on the perspectives. All right. So that is assignment number 6. And you're hopefully very well familiar with assignment 7, portfolio. If anybody wants another review of their portfolio, or if they haven't gotten one yet, come talk to me during lab. We can look at them one more time. Wednesday, as in 2 days, there is not a formal lecture. Hopefully, everyone still come. It'll be mostly a work day, so we can work on the portfolios, we can work on the perspectives. I'm here just to help everyone as much as possible. Okay, so that's what we'll do on Wednesday. Monday, there's no class, as Monday is finals week. Okay, so no class. I will not be here. You can come use the lab. I'm sure every one of these computers will be full, as a majority of this class that's here right now is not even in my class, and that will get even worse. Not that it's a bad thing, but whole place will be packed on Monday, for sure. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So architectural perspective, as we've kind of started the last couple classes, you're going to want to start with opening your cabin, okay? So instead of, the last couple classes when doing the elevations, the sections, and the plans, we've started by creating our views, exporting them as JPEGs, bringing them into Photoshop, okay? We're going to do the same thing, but we're going to kind of reverse it a little bit. We're going to start by selecting our background image first because, when we're working with a plan, we're working with sections and elevations, we do take in mind light, and we take in mind kind of the environment to which this image will be set in. But really the perspective is by far the most important one, whereas you're not just seeing a building in pure elevation or in pure section, you're actually seeing the depth and the perspective of the building. Okay, so there's a lot more shadows typically in place. So we're really taken back to when we looked at composition, when we first started Photoshop, and we were talking about doing some basic photo isolation and bringing people into scenes and things like that. So we really got to go back and ask ourselves all those same questions. All right, so we're going to go to Creative Commons and we're going to look at some more images. I would encourage you, when you're selecting your images, to possibly select maybe one a little bit more challenging image. Okay, so let's just go there really quickly and we'll kind of talk about what it is that might be. Okay, you'll notice in the assignment it actually tells you to pick something that you could do a reflection on. That reflection could be in the windows. It could also be on the water. That seems to be a fairly popular kind of option for this last and final image. I'll reinstate again that this is, this image that you're creating today, this is the best image you will create the entire semester. So, feel free to challenge yourself a little bit in terms of the picture that you might take or that you might find. So I'm going to click on Flickr. Let's type in Yosemite Meadow. Did I spell that right? Probably not. Let's see what we get. So this is actually a great one, as the building would fit in pretty nicely. The most important thing that I'm looking for right now is lighting. Okay, this is actually a really good one. I haven't seen that one before. That's probably going to be the one that I end up doing. I'm going to come back to that, as I can see very clear lighting. I can see very clear shadows. It's a very crisp image. Okay, so I know it's high definition. Can confirm that. Really high definition, really big image. So that's good. But it's definitely a really nice image of Yosemite. If you want to challenge yourself a little bit more, this is also a good one. As you can see, there's a little bit of water in front, so you could put your building up here along the edge of the water, and you could have your building reflecting into that. So that is an option. Ideally, I would use this, but ideally I'd want one that doesn't also have the mountain in the back, or the mountain already pretty much filling up the entire bit of water. Let's see what else we have. This is kind of an interesting one, as your building could kind of be off to the side, although you'll probably end up cropping out a little bit too much of your cabin. All right. You don't want to pick something that's too, where the lighting levels are too extreme, just because we're not working with a rendering engine like V-Ray, where we can actually determine the lighting conditions a lot better than we can in SketchUp. This is still a fairly basic level rendering. So you can certainly put your building into something that has fog and snow. In fact, actually, I saw one last semester where someone put theirs in snow, and it actually ended up looking fantastic. But just something to keep in mind is that when you're choosing like a really, really dark image, or you're choosing a really snowy or foggy image, that it could be a little bit difficult to get the lighting settings correct when working inside SketchUp. All right, so plenty of good. Oh, this is also kind of a nice one. Your building doesn't have to necessarily be right in the very front of the image. It could be kind of, you might do one where it's fairly close. You might do one where it's, nice and tucked back and it's kind of in the background. Don't worry about trying to, really, pick two scenes that are exactly the same. Pick two images that you think just look really good. Obviously, by searching Yosemite, you'll be able to find plenty that resemble kind of the nature that we're looking for. Okay. This would be a really good one. You could put the building maybe back here on the other side of the river. Okay, so all different options for you. Let's see, where was... I kind of want to do one in the water. Let's just try this one right here. Let's see if this is big enough. A little small. All right, I'm going to skip it. I'm going to go back to the original one that we were just looking at. I think it was this one right here. So let's go ahead and download this. This will be my image for today. 15 megabyte file. All right, so while that's downloading, we'll come back to that in just a second. Let's go ahead and jump back over to SketchUp and let's start to determine what that perspective might be. Okay, so when you go back and you look at that image, one of the things that you're going to have to look at is where is the image taken from? Was this taken from, you know, the human eye perspective, you know, with a tripod or by hand? Are they on top of a bluff? Are they slightly below where the cabin might be sitting? So ask yourself those questions to determine that, okay? This is probably most of the images that you'll see on Creative Commons are probably taken from the human perspective, but you'll certainly find others, all right? So let's go ahead and copy this over. All right, let's go back to, let's actually look at really quickly. Let's look at where our lighting is coming from. So if you look at this image, we can pretty clearly see that the lighting is coming from the upper left-hand corner. The sun's probably, the sun looks pretty high. It's probably about, I would guess, like noon, being that the shadows around the tree are relatively short. All right, so they're not cast super far from the tree. So that should give us a pretty good idea of how we can create our shadows inside SketchUp. All right, so once we determine where that angle might be, all right, so if we kind of look at what is it that I want to showcase in this image, I would say that I probably want to showcase something along you know, this side of my building, as it's probably, I guess you could call, maybe you could say it's probably the sexiest side of the building, as this is not as much. You don't see the transom windows. Most buildings kind of have one really photogenic side of the building. All right, if we go to camera, say view, toolbars, and we click on large tool set, you'll notice that there's this little button down here in the bottom left-hand corner that says position camera. If you use this little button, it looks like it's a little image of a human with a red X, although it kind of looks like a penguin with a red X. Whatever it might be is okay. So if we click on that and we click down onto our scene, what that will do is it will give you a perspective from the human eye. Okay, so it's about 5'6" Okay, and the second alternative would be to, if you don't want to use this tool, you can position the camera as you wish. But you may not, you know, this will certainly give you the advantage of knowing that it's at the correct perspective. So let's see, I'm going to kind of, let's see. So I know it's about like that. I'm going to kind of position it the best that I can. I'd say that looks pretty good right about there. Okay, so we'll go ahead and test this in just a second. We'll actually export this one time and we'll bring it into Photoshop just to make sure that it is indeed the correct perspective. All right, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to scenes and I'm going to save this as my scene so that I can come back to it. And before I go through the whole process of exporting all of our views, let's go ahead and just export this one time, insert it into our scene, just to make sure that it's the right perspective, okay, and that it's not off. Don't waste your time by going through and just immediately exporting all 3 or 4 of your images and then come to find out that it's not quite the right perspective. All right, so let's test it. We'll go to Export 2D Graphic. Let's go to Options. Let's change the size to something a little bigger. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and hit OK. And let's. I will in a second. This is just a test, so we will end up modifying this. We'll save this here. All right. And then let's go back to Photoshop, and which is not open. Give me just a sec. All right, so I'm going to open my background image. I place that on my desktop. All right, so we have our background image. Let's go ahead and place in the image of our building. All right, so Yosemite House, test with 2 T's, place, and we'll have something that looks about like that. Okay, so we'll go ahead and place that. And then instead of, you can go to multiply you can go ahead and change your blending mode to multiply. You'll probably find that you really won't be able to see that. That's okay, that's pretty typical. Another thing that we can do is we can just adjust the transparency. All right, so maybe we bring the transparency to about 50% or so, and then I can bring my building a little bit closer into my scene, okay? If you need to make it larger, you can do that. You can go to Control T for transform, hold down Shift, and that will allow you to make the building smaller or larger. Although what I would consider you doing, instead of making it smaller or larger inside Photoshop, make it larger in SketchUp, okay? So that when you export your views, that you can export them one on top of the other without having to try to line them up, because I promise you, you'll have a much harder time lining them up than you will trying to just export them correctly from SketchUp, okay? So I'd say that looks pretty good. That looks like the side that I want, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and say that I'm okay with that. Once I'm okay with that, I can delete this image, as I'm gonna go back here and I'm going to export the same angle, but I'm going to export it a lot larger. All right. So I'm going to go over to my scenes. I'm going to refresh that scene by clicking on Update. All right. I always forget it's opposite up here on the screen. So I'm going to click on Update Scene, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Update, and that will resave the angle of the building that we just changed it to. All right. So from here, I can now turn off my axes and my guides, as we usually do. All right, so I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, as I think we're all pretty familiar with how this process works. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save this export 2D graphic, and let's call this hidden line. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and turn on our shadows. So I'm going to turn on my shadows in my right toolbar. All right, we're going to look at how the shadows are compared to the scene that we were just in. All right, so if we look at that image one more time, we notice that the sun is pretty much at about high noon. Shadows are relatively short, not too long. All right, so I'm going to go over to this. I'm going to change this to about noon, maybe just a little bit beyond. I'm going to change it to about summer, or maybe about this time. So I know that what I'm looking for is I'm looking for this side of the building to be I'm looking for this side of the building to have the shadow. I do want it to cast a little bit more onto the ground, so I may have to just make it a little bit more beyond noon, okay? I'd say that looks pretty good. That looks pretty spot on with what I'm looking for this image, okay? So the next thing that we're gonna do is we're going to save our shadows layer. We all know that we're going to go to Edit. We're going to turn off the edges, all right, so that we have just the layer of the shadows. All right, so we're gonna go to File. It's only about the 5th class in a row that this happens to. Oh, the autosave. I was literally thinking about it when I was opening up Photoshop too. As much as it drives you crazy, it will definitely save your life a couple times. All right, so we'll go ahead and go to Export 2D Graphic. We're going to call this Yosemite House Shadows. All right, export. All right, let's do this one more time. Let's turn back on our edges. All right, I'm not going to export X-ray just because I actually have quite a bit already in my scene, okay? Or I can already see through my windows pretty easily through the other side of the building. All right, so I'm going to turn back edges. I'm going to go to select. Let's go over to sketchy edges. I'm going to go ahead and choose pen gray. That's super sketchy. Let's use that one. That looks pretty good. Go to File, Export, 2D Graphic, Yosemite House, Sketchy. Oh, I forgot to turn off my shadows. Darn it. Let's do this one more time. So I'm just going to turn off my shadows, File, Export, 2D Graphic. And I'm going to do this one more time, but I'm actually going to do the next one in a color mode. Remember we talked about if you're going to export this in color once to get kind of the color of the windows, that's usually okay. It usually works pretty well. I still haven't determined whether or not I will use it. I think last time, I ended up using it. But ideally this would be perfect if I didn't have my stone. This will work right here. So that'll work for my color view. All I'm actually looking for is the colored windows. All right, so File. Let's turn off my axes and my guides. And File, Export, 2D Graphic. Let's call this color. All right, so now we're ready to start creating the perspective. Okay, so first steps, we're going to go ahead and drop in our building. So we're going to go to File, Place, and let's drop in the hidden line first. All right, so I'm going to drop in the hidden line. I'm going to go ahead and place it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and place it. And I'm going to turn this to, let's see, multiply, so that I can kind of set it in my scene, okay? This already looks pretty good. I'm going to put it back on normal for just a few seconds. All right, I'm going to say maybe we can turn on the opacity, maybe about 70%, just to kind of get the image situated. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and place it right there. All right, turn this back over to 100, and then I can then drop my other images right on top. You'll notice that when you place them right on top, they will kind of snap to each other once you place them over each other. All right, so we'll go ahead and put in shadows, place. All right, so that one's right there, right on top of my other image. We'll go ahead and turn this to multiply. I'll do the same thing with my sketchy edges. Go to File, Place, Sketchy, and we are good. All right, so we'll go to Place, and good. Change this to multiply, and that's what I'm looking for. All right, so I'm going to go back to my original image, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the white background. All right, so if I go over to and use my magic wand, I'm going to turn off my other two images for just a second. I'm going to use my magic wand, select everything around my building, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the layer mask tool. Oops, other way. So before I click on the layer mask tool, let's go up to image, and we're going to go ahead and select the inverse. You can also right click and click on select inverse. All right. And now we will have our building right at the, without the background on it. Okay. A couple more steps that we could take. Actually, let me go ahead and backtrack just a little bit. A couple more steps that we can take might be what? There's a couple things that we did not select out of our image that would be pretty useful. Windows, yeah, correct. So you can definitely select your windows and have that be removed from your image as well. So let me select on my original hidden line. All right, so I'm going to select all of my windows. I think that's a window over there. That's not. This is. I think that is 2. That is 2. Let's go over here. Let's select these. Okay, so we're going to select all of our windows. I think that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and try that one more time. Of course, opposite way again. Right click, we're gonna click on select inverse, and let's go ahead and use that layer mask. All right, perfect. That looks pretty good. All right, so let's go ahead and turn back on our shadows for just a few minutes. So we're gonna go back and we're going to use a couple tools that we learned in the past. We're going to use the grass clone stamp, but we're also going to go back and we're going to use the grass clone stamp for our shadows. Okay, so we're going to get a little bit of a refresher on how to use the clone stamp with the shadows. All right, so we're going to first start by doing the non-shadow area. We'll use the clone stamp to kind of hide this hard edge of the building. All right, so let's go ahead and first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my background. I'm going to select a portion of my image. I'm going to select just the area that's right about here. All right. I'm going to select that portion and I'm going to Control C, Control V. That's going to copy just that layer that I just selected. The reason why I'm doing that, when I'm using the grass clone stamp, is so that when I'm holding down Alt and I'm selecting material, you have to do that on the same layer that you're working on. So it's actually helpful to have a duplicate of the background as the layer that you're working on, okay? So you don't have to hold down, click on the background layer, hold down Alt, select your image, click on the new layer, and that just becomes a really tough and annoying process. All right, so by doing that, you won't even be able to tell the difference from the background layer, but now when I hold down Alt, I'm gonna go ahead and go to my clone stamp tool. Let's make the brush quite a bit bigger. I'm going to say about 100. We're all very familiar with what number clone stamp this is going to be. It's going to be number 134. And then I can hold down my, Alt, and I can start to mask in my grass. Okay. So the reason why I'm not seeing it is because that layer is currently not in the right portion. Whoops. Let's see, or I'm sorry, it's not at the right, or it's not at the correct layer. So I'm actually going to bring my my house just below the layer 1. All right. So and then let's see. Let's go back one more step. So what I need to do is I just need to mask out of this area where that grass was. All right. So let's go ahead. I'm going to hide this portion of that, or I'm going to hide layer 1 real quick. I'm also going to hide the background so that I can click on my Yosemite house. I'm going to click around it. I can then click on layer 1, turn it back on, and we'll go ahead and do a layer mask one more time for this. All right, perfect. This is what I'm looking for. I can now turn on the background and I could start to add my grass. So again, I'm going to click on my clone stamp. All right, I'm going to hold down Alt and I could start to place in that grass. If you're working within an area where there's lots of different shades of colors of grass, you can see here in this image, you got some tans, you got some greens, and you even got some dark greens and some parts of shadows as well. You're probably gonna have to click on Alt a handful of times so that you can kind of select the different variations of color from that grass, okay? So for back here, I might hold down Alt, click on that lighter color grass to fill in right here at the edge. I might click on this dark green grass for the corner. All right, so I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna select the various different types of grass as I go along in my scene. Okay, so I'm gonna keep adding that edge. The goal is to remove that hard edge of my building. All right, bear with me for just a second while I go through this. Okay, it's starting to look pretty good. Starting to cover up that whole edge. All right, but notice how the grass continues to change in color along the edge of the building, okay? These are all just small details that, might seem to be, sometimes you're like, oh, it's probably a little bit too much, but these are all the little details all add up in the very end. So it's important to take the time and actually get them to all be correct. All right, so we'll fill in this little area right here. Same thing along the edge of my building. Make sure that when you guys are selecting or that you're putting down your grass, make sure that you select the right size clone stamp so that it also matches the scene. All right, bear with me for just a sec, almost done. Let me back up just a little bit. My grass is getting a lot shorter on this side of the building. All right, so let me back up just a bit. Let's change my stamp size to kind of correspond with the building. All right, so I think that looks pretty good. All right, so now we can go forward with adding a little bit of detail to our shadow. All right, so I'm going to turn everything off. I'm going to turn off everything but the shadow layer. All right, so I'm going to turn off layer 1, which let's go ahead and call layer 1 grass edge, so we know what that is. And let's turn off the background. Let's turn off all layers but the shadow. Okay, so you should have something that looks like this. So continuing to use the clone stamp, all right, so continue to use the clone stamp. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and add the white grass on the front of our shadow. This is probably reminding you a little bit of the last lecture that we did regarding this. You're gonna use the white grass shadow on the front, and you're gonna use the black for the rear, okay? So if we go over using the same clone stamp, and with our shadow layers selected, I'm going to hold down Alt, select the white. Let's rasterize the object really quickly. So we're going to right click on the layer. We're going to go ahead and click on rasterize layer. And now we can click on Alt. We're going to go ahead and click on the white portion of our shadow. And we're going to go ahead and add the grassy texture to the front. Okay? So it's going to look something about like that. All right, let's make the brush just a little bit smaller for the back, and we'll continue, select the white, and go all the way to the very back. Okay, and then when we get to the back of the shadow, we're going to do the opposite. All right, so we're going to select the gray. We're going to select the gray from the shadow and add the gray shadow to the back. Sorry, I kind of goofed that up just a tiny bit. All right, this probably takes a little bit more precision. Okay, that's a little goofy over here in the corner, but that should be fine. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn back on all of our layers. All right, so again, the goal being to soften that really crisp edge that the shadow casts on the grass. We all know that the shadow, when cast on the grass, wouldn't cast, a really fine edge. All right, so let's turn back on all of our layers. All right, and you can see that overall we have the effect that we're looking for. Okay, one thing that I do notice is that my shadow is a lot softer than the shadow of the tree. Okay, so we can go back over to our shadows layers. We can right click on that. We can click on duplicate. Go ahead and hit OK, and that will darken the shadow. Okay, I'd say that's a much better resemblance of the tree over here. But we can even take it one step further. Okay, as we can go ahead and use our dodge and burn tool to go ahead and give some nice ambient shadows to the areas that need it, like the underhang of my roof and some of the areas maybe right underneath the beams. So there's quite a few areas that could use that little extra attention to detail to give some more depth to those shadows. Okay, so a little refresher on on dodge and burn, we're going to go ahead and go up to layer. And are we going to add an adjustment layer or a regular layer? Nope. If we're going to go ahead and use our dodge and burn tool, are we going to use, what kind of layer are we going to use? It's just going to be just a regular new layer. Okay, so we'll go ahead and click on layer, and we're going to go ahead and change the mode to what? What was it? Nope. Overlay. Yep. We'll go ahead and click on overlay. We'll click on the box that says fill with overlay neutral color, or 50% overlay neutral color. Let's go ahead and call this dodge and burn. All right, so we'll hit OK. And we're going to put this right over my shadows layer. All right, and we're going to go ahead and do Control Alt G. Yep, we should all have that one down by now, so that the dodge and burn applies to only the shadows layer below. All right, so I'll go over to my my burn tool. All right, so dodge tool looks like the lollipop, burn tool looks like the hand. All right, let's make my brush a little bit bigger. And this looks pretty good. And we can go through here and start to darken all of the shadows underneath my roof line. And ideally, they'd probably be pretty dark. Okay, so I'll probably go back here in a little bit and make them a lot darker. If I was to actually merge both of my shadows layers, this would actually become a lot darker because it's only applying the dodge and burn to only that first layer. Yep, you got it. All right, so just darkening this just a little bit more. Okay, might darken the edge of the mullions, the other face. Okay, it's starting to look pretty good. All right, we'll do the same thing underneath this overhang. If you guys want to be precise on your dodge and burn, don't be afraid to use your lasso tool so that you can select the area that you want to dodge and burn. Okay, so if I only want to dodge and burn just this area very carefully underneath the beam and not actually burn the beam itself, I can select that area, go back to my my burn tool, and start to fill that in. Okay, and it's only going to fill in the area from the selection. Okay, so I'll go back and I'm going to continue to refine this here in a little bit, but that will do that. That'll work for now. Okay, I'll go back and add some of the other areas in a few minutes. All right, so dodge and burn, that starts to give us the nice ambient shadows that we're looking for in the house. All right, so last but not least, we can start to tile in the different textures that we're going to use for our rendering. Okay, I'm going to turn off my sketchy edges. I can actually still see the edge of my building. I'll go through and I'll fix that here in a few minutes. So let's turn off sketchy edges. All right, that looks a lot better. That actually starts to look a lot more, nestled into the grass. All right, so let's see. Let's go ahead and import our texture. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and use the same texture that we used last class. I'm going to go to File, Place, and let's see. What do I got here? Let's go to week 16B, Textures, and I'm going to use let's use the board form concrete this time, actually. So it'll be a little bit different than last class. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go File, Place. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. We're going to need to scale this to about the right size. I would scale your image to the closest portion of your building that you have. So for my particular instance, the closest part of the building is going to be this edge right here. So if you're thinking each one of these boards is about 6 inches, estimate that 6 inches at the closest part of your building. Okay, so being that we're working on a perspective, what's the kind of the one extra step that we need to take when placing our materials? Scale is one. And one more. Most critical of everything that we're doing today. Perspective, of course, right? It's in the name of the lecture. All right, so we have to worry about the perspective. All right, so I'm going to make this a little bit smaller to kind of more accurately represent the right scale. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and bring this down. I think it's going to be a little bit smaller, about like that. All right, and we're gonna go ahead and click on place. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and put that right here, and I'm gonna go ahead and tile one more. All right, so I'm gonna duplicate this, right click and click on duplicate layer and hit OK, and I'm gonna bring that down to the very end. I would always suggest that when you're doing the perspective, always add a little bit more texture, okay? Because you'll be surprised once you actually conform that texture to the building surface, you'll realize you need a lot more than you think, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and click on both of these textures. I'm going to merge them, all right? I'm gonna merge the layers so that they become one. And I'm gonna go ahead and turn on the opacity to this so that I could see what's going on behind as well. And so I'm gonna maybe make that about 70%. And then I'm going to click on Control T for transform. All right, so with that, let's hit enter first. Go ahead and click on Control T, and then that will allow me to start to line up and make some manipulations to my texture. So I'm holding down Control, and by holding down Control, that will allow me to skew the edges of my texture. All right. So I'm going to place this one right on the edge, all right, making sure that I don't mess with the scale too much. I'm still, generally in the right realm, so it's okay. So I'm going to place that edge right on the edge of my building, and still holding down Control, I'm going to grab this edge and I'm going to bring it down a little bit over here, okay? So that just brings it, that kind of gets the scale a little bit more accurate. And then continuing to hold down Control, I'm going to continue to refine the edges of this texture, okay? So I'm trying to match the perspective of the image with the perspective of the texture that I'm adding, okay? So I want to make sure that the back edge of the texture is going into the same perspective. I'd say that looks pretty good, okay? I can make this side maybe a little bit bigger, okay? But overall, pretty happy with that. All right, I'm just kind of dialing it in just a little bit more. All right, I think that looks pretty good. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on OK. I'm gonna click on Apply. I'm gonna hide this for just a sec. Let's call this concrete texture. Okay, and I'm gonna hide that for now. I'm gonna go back over to my original default layer. I'm gonna turn off shadows for a few minutes as well. Oh, I got 2 shadows layers. And I'm gonna use my magic wand tool. I'm going to select that surface. I will then turn on the concrete texture and we will add our layer mask, okay? So then it applies the texture just to the area that we're working with, all right? From there, I can go ahead and turn the opacity back to 100 so that I could see the texture a little bit better. And I'm going to want to make sure that I bring that texture below the grass edge. In fact, the grass edge should probably be the layer that's highest up on the list, as there's not going to be anything else that's in front of it. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that edge right up to the very top, and that will hide that hard edge of the texture. Okay? Question?
Why will not do a grass edge like at the end of the perspective?
Why would you?
Like I can do that long stuff for the edges at the end.
Why do you do it at the edges at the end?
Why will not do it at the end?
What do you mean? I did do it. Oh, over here?
Instead of moving the layer like at the top, I'll just create a new layer before I start working on the edges. Like after I put my texture, then I will do the concept.
I suppose you could do that. So I guess the one benefit of doing it the way that I'm doing it is that I could rearrange my layers in any fashion that I want. Okay, so I think you have a little bit more flexibility, but there are there's typically multiple ways to get to, the end result. So I've always found that my way is the easiest, but if you have another way that you want to get from A to B, that's okay with me. All right. So let me do just a few more textures, okay? Or I'll go do a few more steps to getting this to look pretty good, okay? And then I will go ahead and let you guys get started. All right, so let me zoom out a little bit more. I'm just going to do a couple more of these edges, then I'm going to do a few reflections. I'll add a person in, and that should do it for now, okay? So let me go ahead and do File Place. I'm going to add in that same texture. All right, I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to make the texture smaller so that I can align it with the same edges of the original one. A good strategy, I didn't think about this before, you probably should have duplicated this layer, so the original layer of the texture that you created before you did the distortion. If you do that and you duplicate it, you can just hide it until you need it again, but you know that when you need it again, it's the right scale. That makes sense? So, I mean, I can probably do a pretty good job estimating this right now, but I think doing it the way that I just described would probably allow you to get this dialed in a little bit easier, okay? So same thing, I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate the layer, let's go ahead and add these together. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and add a third. Let's add it to this edge. Did I sneeze? Bless you? Oh yes, did I sneeze. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and merge all three of these layers. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and turn on the opacity so that I can see how they're working together. I'm gonna go ahead and click on, let's see, Enter, and let's do Control T, and I'm going to hold down Control, selecting the middle guide marker, and I'm going to bring it back to the back edge. All right, I think this needs to be a little bit smaller, and I can start to manipulate that perspective accordingly. Okay, this may take a little bit of practice. It may not work perfect, the first time you try it. Just keep that in mind. I'm going to try to line up those edges that I had just created. All right, I think that's pretty close. You may not actually even notice once you do it, but all right. So get that perspective kind of dialed in there. About like that. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. We'll apply to that transformation. I'm going to hide that layer for just a sec. I'm going to go back to my original base layer, use my magic wand, select the edges that I want to apply that texture to, click on that texture again, activate it, and then we'll go ahead and turn on our layer mask. All right, we'll turn the opacity back up to 100%, and we'll call that good. There's definitely a lot more tiling that I need to do, but I won't make you guys watch me do every one of those. All right, so let's go ahead and move my grassy edge a little bit forward. Okay, I'm going to turn on my shadows. Actually, our shadows needs to be a little bit higher as well. So let's see, we got shadows, dodge and burn. That should actually be on the very top. All right, there we go. Now we're starting to get some nice coloring to that building. All right, so I showed you guys last time how to kind of get some nice effects on the windows. I won't do that again right now, but let's go ahead and add a person to the scene. I'll continue working on those other finer details while you guys are doing the same thing, so you can see what the end result looks like by the end of the class. Let's go ahead and add a person. So let's see, I think I have a few people already saved on my thumb drive. All right, so we'll go to, let's do my man running. I remember him from that one lecture. All right, Yeah, we made all these guys, I think, back on assignment 10. So what's kind of, remind me, what is the key to making sure that our person or our human that we're inserting into the scene is at the right scale? There's one trick that we talked about probably about 2 months ago. What's kind of the key to making sure he's the right scale?
The vanishing point.
Exactly. So the vanishing point or the horizon line, okay? So we're going to make sure that his eyes align with the horizon line, okay? So just kind of estimating where that is, I'd say it's probably somewhere right in this area. So I'm going to go ahead and do Control T. I'm going to bring him down just a little bit, okay? And that should be pretty good. I'll do File Place, and maybe I put him in maybe off to the side a little bit. I actually don't really like the running guy. I don't think he fits this scene. Sorry, I'm going to delete him. Not a fan of him. Let me find one of my other people. All right, person walking. Let's try that. Oh, she's not in Yosemite. She's a pretty gal, but she does not look like she's hiking. So she's not going to work either. So we just want to make sure we find the right person for the right scene. Let's try these two. I guess that could work. Let's go ahead and use this. All right, so we're going to go ahead and place these two people right here. Let's put their eyes down to the horizon line. So about like that, okay? So you guys can apply the same techniques that you did with the shadows. You can go ahead and drop in their shadows. You can go ahead and use the same techniques to adding the grass around their feet. So all the same things that we just did to our house, you can do to the person. Ideally, this perspective would probably take about twice the time that an elevation took, because you're really doing every little detail to this perspective. You have to do all the same adjustments that you made for the shadows in the house. You're going to want to make to the to the people that you put inside your scene. But I promise you, when you're all said and done, this is going to look absolutely it's going to look dynamite. All right, so I'll keep working on this, and I'll show you guys what this looks like after I continue to add some of the effects that we learned last class as well. All right, so I'll add the reflection to the windows. So you might add a reflection of the tree, and there's a few other steps as well. So I'll continue to refine this while you guys work on yours. Other than that, good luck. Keep going. Let me know if you have any questions. And let's go ahead and take a break for 10 minutes. Let's come back at 7:40. And then we'll finish up the rest of the class.